States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mr. Ramos?
Here.
Mr. Lindemann?
Here.
Mr. Sabal? Dr. Gomez?
Here.
Mr. Burain?
Here. And I think you got word from Mr. Sabal that he had a medical
Yes.
item he had to attend to, correct?
Yes.
All right, item 2A, discussion action on the approval of Douglas High School class of 2020 graduation plans. First of all, I'd preface your presentation by saying we're really, really elated that you guys have come up with something that I think the board can live with in light of all of the considerations and all of the things that are swirling around about the virus. So we are definitely concerned about the health and welfare of our community, especially our students. And we want to make sure that we say that up front, because whatever we do or the board approves, that we're taking into consideration all of those factors. And it's something that we're not taking lightly at all. So we want to ensure that our students are absolutely protected and our staff as well. So Mr. Walker, if you would give the board the presentation of the option you have that you think would be viable in keeping all of those things in mind.
Good morning. I almost said good evening. So the district DHS administration, counselors, department chairs, myself, Mrs. Samaniego, have been coming up with various plans. If you remember when this all started and you listened to the state meeting, what was the one thing that we kept hearing over and over and over was students weren't going to get to walk. And as we kind of got things going, I brought up to Mrs. Samaniego, what if we ended senior class early? We're still in the early stages here. It's not the Phoenix area where it's massive outbreak. We could still contain some distancing, social distancing, and be rather safe. So we came up with 6 different plans, and talking to Mrs. Samaniego, we came up with Plan 7. And I think that's the one we're going to talk about today is, so May 1st, senior grades would close. They would, any senior that is passing would be allowed to go through this plan as permitted, receive their diploma based on the fact that we get the diplomas in time. There was a little hink. We found out yesterday that we talked to our rep and diplomas were supposed to have been sent last week, but the district rep had put a hold on all shipments. So hopefully they are scheduled to go out today or Monday or tomorrow. That would get them here Friday or Monday. We would still have time to put together all the diplomas for the students. So we would notify the seniors that are eligible to participate based on their current grades, that they're meeting all district requirements, state requirements to graduate. We would notify a number of students, and they would get, say we start at 8 o'clock in the morning, we'd have so many students from 8 to 9. And the time frames, that's just an example. That may get adjusted. They may get, like Regina's here, her time frame might be from 8 to 8:15 to show up. That is not set in stone, that's just an example. They would show up to the district office. They would come in one of the doors. We would have spots to keep social distancing. They would come into the boardroom or the patio area, get their diploma, get a picture, and then they would exit, and we're thinking out this door back into the parking lot area. And if we kept that flow going, we could get it in a day. It would be a long day for myself and Mrs. Samaniego, and probably the counselors and DHS admin. But that is the plan, and any senior that does not meet those requirements on May 1st would still be allowed to continue until May 21st to meet the requirements and still receive their diploma. However that may be due to the circumstances. They may get them in the mail. If we're able to do a drive-through service, hand them to cars. That is too far away to determine yet, but that's kind of the plan in a nutshell.
Let me ask a couple of questions. First of all, Regina, you're the senior class president, right? Glad you're here. It's all about you and your class, and something that hopefully is going to be suitable for you, and you're going to be agreeable, and it's going to be something, certainly not going to be a complete ceremony that your family and your friends and all your relatives and those people that would be interested won't be able to attend, but it's going to be something, and I think that you understand the severity of the gathering and all those things that are associated with it. Does this plan sound, because we want to do something for you, the board wants to do something for you, the administration is strongly supportive of it. Would this be something that would be acceptable to you and your classmates if the board were to accept this procedure?
Well, I know that the majority of the class, a lot of students have been asking if there's a possibility of the ceremony being postponed to maybe June or July when it would be safe, theoretically speaking, if everything were to calm down. Mm-hmm. But given the circumstances, at least this is something. Like, if things don't fix themselves, at least we're going to be able to get our diplomas, like, you're going to be able to hand them to us. Mm-hmm. And I think that's special in its own way. And if we were to come, like, as Mr. Walker said, would we be able to bring, like, a parent with us? At least one? Would that be a possibility? Because I know that this is a big moment for our parents, not just for us, because I know that they've dealt with this for 12, 13 years, and they want to see us get this diploma, so would that be a possibility?
Well, the important thing is going to be, number one, the social distancing, mm-hmm. right?
Definitely.
And the protection of the staff. And the board is extremely concerned about the well-being and welfare of you guys, of the students, and the staff. Mm-hmm. So we don't know, and that's why we're here. We're going to discuss it. Is there some way that with the distancing that you're talking about, Mr. Walker, that masks could be provided for everybody, or could it be obligatory that they wear a mask? You just added another dimension by adding the parents, and I don't know. That board members, what's your reaction? I know the board would be amenable to doing something like this for the students. Let them come in, let them take all the time with the administration. But I don't know if that was a part of the equation, having the parents here. Ms. Samaniego, let me start with you first.
One of the first options that we had come up with was that drive-by ceremony that was going to be taking place at Douglas High School, where the students would be driving up in their car with two guests, and that would be like their two, let's say, assuming that they have their two parents. And initially they were going to allow the parents to get off because the stage was going to be set up on the front lawn of the high school, and it was still going to be one by one student at a time, and they weren't going to be contacting any other student. So that was Mr. Walker's initial idea, and the staff felt very strongly about at least allowing the parents to walk over to the front stage and just see them get their diploma and then leave back in the car. By having it here in this building, that could be a possibility where they walk in with their parent and we still keep the social distancing. And we don't have the masks. DUSD doesn't. I don't think DHS does to provide the parents. Obviously, don't want you to come get your diploma with a mask, but we could make that requirement and allow parents to, I don't know what your thoughts are, to show up with their individual child, if you think that that's.
Here would be the consideration. Forget about the actual walking of the parent and the student. It's what's happening outside with the congregation and how people are mingling out there, and whether they would get here too soon, and before you knew it, you would have a situation where you might have a huge crowd, and then we would be perpetuating that, and I don't know how you could address that with security or whatever. Go ahead.
We would, and I've kind of been thinking about that scenario. We kind of thought about that scenario when we were talking about the high school parking lot area. Only those students' cars would be allowed into the parking lot at that time. So if little Randy Walker was scheduled for 9 o'clock and he shows up at 8:30,
You're staying.
you're driving around until your time is ready to get into the parking lot.
And you'd have security out there too.
We would have security
kind of
stationed.
manning the whole
Right.
situation and making sure that as soon as a student walks out from here, gets in their car and leaves.
But the plan that we're addressing here now, and of course, I know
Mm-hmm.
you're making reference to what would have been one of the other options, but what
No,
we're
here.
addressing specifically is how we could do it here.
Right.
Yes.
And we would still do it with the gates because we have the gates available in the
Mr. Berry?
parking lot.
Yes, is that Dr. Ed?
Yes, this is Dr. Ed. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Doctor.
Kind of go over the point that, because I couldn't hear very well, that the president of the senior class said to you that were different from what we had kind of discussed before.
What Regina said, Dr. Ed, was that the class was hoping that the big ceremony, the actual ceremony that takes place every year, could be postponed to a later time in the summer, like June or July, right? That's what they wish for. However, she said, knowing the circumstances, and we don't even know that June or July, this situation will be over and done with, and they will allow us to congregate in large masses like a normal graduation ceremony does. So what she said is, at least this opportunity of walking per se and getting their diploma is something that is special to them. The only question she had is, instead of just allowing the child or the student to walk in and get their diploma, could they be accompanied by their parent or their two parents, at least to see them get that diploma and then leave? It would still be done one at a time, but that's what she's asking.
Okay. Well, can I give you what I feel?
Go ahead, go ahead, Doctor.
Yeah, okay. I think that, I mean, sure, we could say we could postpone it till the summer, but I mean, that's such a iffy thing. I mean, we don't know. And so that for us to say, okay, yeah, we're going to postpone it to June or July and then not have it, that's not going to be good. Mm-hmm. So that's the one thing. The second thing is, I think that allowing the parents to go into the administrative building with the child, and then having the distancing, wearing a mask, go in, and then have the child get the diploma and leave. I don't think that there would be a security problem, because you could do it so that this is just on the half hour, and you would allow the student and the parents to go in at that, like 5 minutes before, because I don't think it would take that long to have the student get their diploma. So I really am for that much more than having something at the stadium, because you don't know how you're going to control people that come, because they're going to come. So I am more in favor of doing the one at the administration building.
Thank you, Doctor. And again, the situation.
Mr. Ramos.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want a little bit of clarification from Mano or Randy, whoever. If you call in the students at 9 o'clock today or 8:30 or whatever, how many students are going to arrive at that time? Is it just one student at 8:30 and then, for the next student, what's the intervals of time that the next student is going to be on the premise?
Okay, Mr. Ramos, let me just try to repeat what you said. So what he's asking, Mr. Walker, is how would you organize the time frame of the students coming in? For example, how many kids would be showing up at 8 or 8:15 to prevent, large masses of kids?
Okay. And we had that discussion at length a couple times. What would happen is if we broke it into hours, we figured that there's 342 seniors currently. And if we're hoping that all 342 graduate and are able to participate in this, based on that number, and we felt it would be safe we were giving 2 minutes per child, that would be approximately 9 hours of doing this. And we would break it up into 30, I believe it was 30 per hour.
Of course, if the board approved it, and the logistics would certainly be up to you and Ms. Samaniego, with the full cooperation of the senior class and their parents. The length of time it would take, and I know it would be a burden on the staff, but that shouldn't even be a consideration of ours. I think in order to accommodate and get this done and get it done with their parents, and I would be for that.
Right.
I think the time is negligible, to be honest with you.
Well, we needed to figure out the time to see if we needed
Right,
one
right.
day, 2 days,
Right.
how long each one would take. We actually did a run-through with one of the scenarios that would be similar to this scenario, and we got through 4 students in 1:06. So, and we're giving each student 2 minutes. So there's going to be some lag time, available time. If somebody's running late, we're able to get it through, speed it up, slow it down, to meet that time. If we started at 8 o'clock, we'd finish about 6 o'clock that night.
Regina, do you think that you could impress on the students, your fellow classmates, that if the board approved the parents to come in, that they absolutely not congregate at all, that they respect the time frame given them to be recognized? In other words, if the one thing, and I'm going to deviate a little bit, the one thing about July, and I experienced this here one time on another issue, but if you postpone a graduation, a lot of students leave, and they've got commitments. Parents leave town, kids have to go. So you're not going to have a complete, so I agreed with what Dr. Ed said and what the superintendent said. It's going to be iffy at best. So if you could actually impose on your fellow classmates and have some type of a communication with them that please respect it if the board approves it, that if they tell you that you show up at 8:30 and they don't want anybody else on the premises till 9, that whatever the administration works out, do you think you can do that?
Definitely.
Okay, well, that's pretty conclusive.
Mario, right? This is Mario,
Go ahead, Mario.
right?
Go ahead.
Yes, just to be sure that when the student receives a diploma, is there going to be security, making sure that those parents don't stay on the premises, waiting for another student to come by and congratulate each other? Are they going to be asked to leave immediately, or how's that going to be taken care of?
Mr. Ramos, this is Mrs. Amanio. Yes, we will have security, and, all those details haven't been worked out yet, but I can guarantee you that that's a plan that we are going to sit down and really put it in detail as far as, which security are going to be outside, how is this all going to work, to ensure that as soon as the student walks out with their diploma and their parents, that they get in the car and leave, because they're not going to be able to hang outside and, take pictures and all of that. So that will be fully administered by our security team.
Thank you, Anna. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. That would be fine.
And we did bring Mr. Durazo into the conversation because what we want to do is be able to live stream it as this is taking place and people can see it, right? So Mr. Durazo's perspective and his experience that having it inside this boardroom, because the cameras that we have are not the best cameras, he would set up in the patio and we'd do like a backdrop area and make it a nice patio area for them. And that way Mr. Durazo could set up with their nice cameras like we do graduation ceremonies, and then it'll be a nice live broadcast that parents and families can watch at home if they don't make it, if they're not the one or the two parents that can come to the ceremony.
Very good.
So Mr. Durazo really feels that in the patio this wouldn't be conducive. It's too small in here.
Okay, good. But you could do it, Mario? Very good. Do you think that one of the provisions that when you communicate with the class is, and the community is very innovative, that you could ensure that everybody had a mask? You think that you could communicate that to your fellow classmates, that it's one of the provisions, if they want to come in the building, that they have to be wearing a mask?
We could let them know, but we can't guarantee that they're going to bring masks.
Randy, go ahead.
What if we and based on your approval, that if a student wishes to bring one or two parents, that their guardians, that they are wearing a mask?
And if
Okay.
they
The
don't,
student would be allowed in without,
Okay.
but the parent, if they bring one or two guests, that person is wearing some type of mask.
Right, and then the other thing, and I know you're waiting there, Mitch, just let me just quickly say this because we're on that topic. The pressure is going to be on security and the administrators outside, because parents are going to show up probably uninformed, not because the district didn't do their job, but that they didn't get the word, and they're going to show up without a mask. And they're going to say, you're not going to keep me from going in there without a mask. That's going to have to be discussed on how that's going to be handled, and you're going to absolutely have to have Mr. Long involved in this.
Absolutely.
And so, go ahead, Mitch.
Thank you. This is Mitch commenting. Regina, the purpose of having a parent is just to watch you get the diploma?
Yes, just to watch us get the
Just to
diploma.
watch it.
They wouldn't be interacting with anybody.
Right. And then where were the pictures? Because Mr. Walker said that you had receive it and get a snapshot from.
Yes, so normally we have the photographer that
Right.
is there at graduation night,
Right.
and so that's the professional, official picture, right?
Right.
We could have that person here, and then they take the picture there as every day, and then,
So the parent doesn't necessarily want to take the picture.
No,
We're just trying to
yes.
make things more
And-
efficient.
yes, and that,
As you come through, receive your diploma. If the parents are only there to watch you receive it, you've already got a picture. So, in my mind,
well, I think for the kids, Mr. Lindeman, nobody else is going to be around, and so they want their parents there,
Okay.
you know? That's a special moment to them and their parents, and I would agree with that.
One other quick question that I have is, how is the diploma going to actually be given to the student? Or is it just going to be placed on the table and they pick it up? Or there's not going to be any handshaking or anything
No.
like that, correct?
No.
Go ahead and get
We
into that.
won't be
Ms.
able to
Walker.
do that.
No hugs, no handshakes, no kisses. Actually, there's two scenarios. One is we have the table there, and as the students are announced or they're going to the stations, they're pulling out the diplomas and setting them on the tables. As the student walks by, they pick up their diploma, get their picture, and then they move forward. The other one is if you've been to any of the fast food restaurants, they've got the little trays. So we could put one in a tray, hand it to them, they pick it up out of the tray. There's a couple different options. We haven't necessarily worked out which option we want to go with, but yeah, there would be no handshaking, no direct interaction with the
Okay, members of the board, Mr. Ramos or Dr. Ed, do you have any more comments or questions regarding the procedure?
Yeah, this is Ed. Go ahead, Mario.
This is Mario. No, I have none.
Okay, yes, this is Dr. Ed. Okay, you know, what would make it easy is to use the west entrance for the students and parents to come in, have the background put somewhere, like on the door that goes to the offices, not the offices, but to the outside, and then when they get their diploma, then the child and the parents go out the north entrance, you know, kind of over there where the coaches are. That way they don't run into each other and they can get into their cars and they can leave.
Correct.
It'll flow like this.
Correct. I think that if Mario, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay. I think that if we, in principle, no pun intended, approve this, if we approve this for the administration to work all of those concerns and details out, logistically, it can happen, correct, Mr. Walker?
Yes, I believe so.
You can do it. Anna, you can do it.
Yes.
Would that be satisfactory to you, Regina, do you think, and your classmates? If we, and the board is now considering letting the parents in with you?
Yes, I think the senior class would very appreciate it if their parents could attend this ceremony.
Well, again, I'm going to tell you, we're here for you guys. This board wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. All the buildings or the employees, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for you people. So we're gonna do that, and I'll ask for the question unless members of the board or the superintendent has any other comments they want to make regarding. If you got a
No.
pretty good path and direction to follow, Mr. Walker.
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to
Ms.
say-
Samaniego?
Yes, and we'll work out all those details in the next week, and Mr. Nunez and his book adoption team will have to come and help us clear out that patio so that we can make it nice, yes.
And final
President.
comments, Mr. Walker.
And what we will do is we will work out kind of the bullet points, what we did before with the previous 6 plans, and we will get that to Mrs. Samaniego, and I'm sure she will be in on our discussions, as will Marco and Bobby and everybody else that this pertains to. And we'll get those to her, so that way she can get those to you, and then if you have any questions or concerns.
And that'll all be on the website, it'll be on the district Facebook. Hopefully, Bruce is very good about covering that, and I'm
Right.
sure he'll look at the
We'll get it to student emails on our
Right.
website, the Facebooks. We'll put it out as, actually, we have one of our seniors right there who will probably walk out of this room and start sending out the message now. And so, yes.
Okay, and then one last quick thing. As far as the ceremony in totality is concerned, you're going to have, Marco's going to have the ability to put the salutatorian, the valedictorian, the senior class president speeches in there, right?
The game plan is May 22nd. We will have something to play for the seniors and their parents, and whether it's a video or PowerPoint or something that flows with the speeches of
Okay,
everybody, so that they will also have that. So in essence, the vast majority of seniors will get 2 graduations this year.
That's very good. And
You're
is your
special.
speech ready already, Regina? Do you have your, could we preview it here today?
I'm still fixing it.
Oh,
My speech is still being edited now.
okay, very good. All right.
Mr. President, I just want to say that
Go ahead, Mitch.
this is a very important and special time for the graduates and their parents, and I'm glad that we can be able to put it all together as best under the circumstances and everything, so.
Yeah, again, we're doing the best we can under the circumstances, and I know I speak on behalf of all the board, we're very pleased to do that. All right, I think where we are now is Is somebody trying to make?
No, no.
I think where we are now, Mr. Lindeman, if you'd make a motion.
Yes,
to
thank you,
approve.
Mr. President. I move to approve the Douglas High School Class of 2020 graduation plans.
Okay, motion by Mr. Lindeman. Could I get Dr. Ed or Mr. Ramos to second?
Second, hey, Dr. Ed.
Dr. Ed, second. Any further discussion? Anything comes to mind? And also, we're giving you the authority, giving the superintendent the authority. The ceremony's approved, and we're extremely happy we could do that. But if anything comes up, we're going to give the superintendent administrative flexibility to work out some of those details that she and in conjunction with the high school principal work that out, okay?
Okay.
All right, call for the motion, roll call.
Mr. Ramos?
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman?
Yes.
Dr. Gomez?
Yes.
Mr. Burry?
Yes. All right, you got a graduation going. Congratulations, that's great. And thank you so much for being down here. It's always good to hear from the students, all right? Thank you. All right. Did you have something else, Mr. Walker? Did you have something, Regina, you wanted to say? You're done? Okay. Action, item 2B, discussion action on the approval of Douglas Unified School District certified and classified salary schedules. Ms. Samaniego.
Before you, you have the following salary schedules that we worked on with Mr. Nunez, Mr. Soto, actually our leadership team. And so the first salary schedule you have there is the administrative salary placement schedule. And what we did with that was add, try to make our salaries more competitive. Mr. Nunez fought hard all year long and felt that, you know, our administrative salaries are not competitive enough. And so we try to make those a little bit better. You know, they're still not at where other places pay our administrators. So that's the first one. Then, obviously, we do have our principals staying with that 234-day work calendar as they have since they were made that 12-month employee. So I wanted to point that out. The next salary schedule is your certified salary placement schedule, which includes teachers, counselors, the behavior specialist, TOSAs, and school improvement specialist. And so these are your certified employees. And we increased the initial placement salary by $1,500. So we're proud to say that a new teacher being hired by the district will now be receiving $33,500. So that has been a big increase from years past, and Mr. Nunez even said that he was very proud of that because he's, you know, works with HR and collaborates with different districts, and a lot of the districts, of course, they use the 301 monies to kind of put that as a point of selling their district, right, Mr. Nunez?
Yeah. What did you call it? Fluff?
So this is our our certified salary schedule. Then there are no changes to the extra duty salary schedule. That there was no changes. We can't pay more at this time for any extra sponsors or coaching, any of that. And then the last salary schedule that we worked on is the classified support salary schedule. And by doing what we did, we just put the positions where we felt that they needed to be depending on their responsibilities. And of course, the lower level you are, you know, the more responsibility and more pay you have. It's not perfect, but, you know, every year we've done something with the salary schedules to make them, to improve them. Mr. Nunez, do you have anything on?
Okay, I want to make sure that the board understands that we're not approving
Yeah.
any increases
Yes,
yet.
it's just
We're just
these-
approving the
the sal-
schedule,
Mhm.
all right? And so, members of the board, do you have any questions regarding the schedule? And I think it's good news that we're finally getting that base pay up. We're not anywhere near where we should be. No,
No.
not anywhere near, but we're working on it. Mr. Soto, I know that you work strenuously to do the best you can for these salaries with a little pushing from the board. But we appreciate that. Mr. Lindeman, did you have a question?
No, thank you.
Okay,
Just
so
make
we're
motion.
ready for the motion, and then we'll have discussion. Go ahead.
This is Lindemann.
Lorraine?
Yeah, Dr. Gomez.
Hey, this is Ed. I
Yeah.
just have a question. Okay, these salary schedules, now, are they dependent on we're going to give?
Yes,
No.
so, well, we're approving, we would like for you to approve the salary schedules yet, because these are just placement, Dr. Ed. So the next item is for you to approve the salary increases, but that really doesn't have anything to do with, I mean, it does and it doesn't, but this is just to show you a new person coming into the district, where would they be
much
placed
they
at?
will
Mhm. If
All
that-
right, good.
Okay?
Yeah,
That's what I
it-
needed to know.
It's
Okay.
it's a structure so that they know
Yes.
where placement is for teachers. All right, entertain a
Yeah.
motion.
I move to approve the DUSD certified and classified salary schedules.
Is there a second?
Mario,
Mario.
second.
Okay,
Second.
second by Mario. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Ramos?
Yes,
Mr. Lindeman?
Yes,
Dr. Gomez?
Yes.
Mr. Burring?
Yes, and before we get off, and since we're discussing salary schedules, I want to bring the attention, I want the board to direct its attention to the last category, which is the classified support staff salary schedule. And I want you to view the way those classifications are set up by category. And this is something that the administration has been working on for at least 2 years that I know of, because prior to this, they only had maybe 2 or 3 categories, and they were all lumped in to the same category, and there wasn't really any distinction in pay grades, pay levels, or recognition for anything that classified was doing. I first want to compliment the administration for having worked on that and brought us to where we are today looking at it. But to me, I just want to comment on a couple of things that I think we still need to address. And one is very specifically that, and there's a lot to be said, and always realize that when you look at salary schedules and you look at positions and ranges, that the only way to really make any changes is to look at the job description. Because the job description is the description of the position, and always keep in mind it's not the person. Because a lot of times people say, well, they build a job description around the person. You build a job description around the duties and responsibilities of the position. All right, so having said that, if you look at grounds, and I'm just going to quickly point this out, and you look at a maintenance worker, I think that there's a disparity there, and the reason for that being that a grounds worker and a maintenance worker are actually, they should be in the same category, with the exception that if you have somebody in grounds or you have somebody in maintenance that's is certified in their trade, or they're certified by some profession, like we recognize nurses as being certified, but not certified by the State Board of Education. But if you have say a journeyman electrician, or a welder, or a plumber, or a mechanic, or a carpenter, that distinction should be made, to me, in another category to recognize that background. Because when you look at, let's just say, some of these specialists we have here, like the HVAC person, and the electricians, and in some cases welders that are very specialized, and plumbers that are very specialized, pipe fitters, they should be recognized more. And I think that there should be, administration, a sensitivity to that, and to look at the possibility of forming another category. By doing that, you consolidate grounds and maintenance, and the way you distinguish between who's who there is by having those areas of specialization and recognizing them, because there's really no difference between a regular grounds worker and a regular maintenance worker. But there is between a certified carpenter or a welder or a mechanic, and so I think we should look at that.
Okay.
All right. And that's not.
If we do, Mr. Moraine, and we look at that, and like I said earlier, it's not perfect, but I do agree with you that the first, and we did have a situation yesterday that we even were talking about and may need to look at it a little bit further. But you're right, looking at the job description and not the person. And oftentimes we get, so invested in a person, but it's the job description and the position that we need to look at. So if we do, and if there's any changes, we can always bring back.
Oh,
That-
certainly,
yeah, right?
certainly. It's
Mhm. Yeah.
not for any
Mhm.
immediacy,
Yeah.
but to recognize those classified people. What happens a lot of times is you have a person come in and personally say to HR, Mr. Nunez, I feel like I'm really doing a lot more work than Emily down the hall is doing. And Mr. Nunez says, I got to look at the job description. I can't look at what you're doing. I look at what the duties and responsibilities of that description are. That's what tells me what work you do and what work you don't you don't do. And I'll tell you, with this conversation, you're going to have others within those categories are going to come to you and say, well, what about me? And then that's when Mr. Nunez says, well, let's look at the job descriptions. Now, I can tell you I was involved in it about 4 years ago where we reviewed all of the job descriptions. And we did upgrade some. But I think it's time to take another look at it. And it is an open season on you guys, on the administration, where everybody's going to be coming in and saying, well, look at mine, look at mine. There has to be a legitimate reason for looking at it, okay? And it should come from the supervisor and not the individual themselves. Okay, having said all of that, let's move on to item C, discussion action on the approval.
Ray,
You would need to
Ray,
approve, right?
Ray, before you make a motion, this is Mario. Ray,
We voted on it, didn't we?
Yes,
You did? Okay.
Yeah, we voted on it.
no,
Mr. Ramos?
no, Ray.
Go ahead,
this
Mario.
is Mario. I just wanted to, I wanted to add a comment to that, what we were just discussing right now. We used to have a welder, a certified welder that made all these census for labor rain and the high school, did a wonderful job. And he was getting paid the same amount as the maintenance crew or the groundskeeper. And he left and went to work for the county for that reason. So it's very important, as Ray just mentioned right now, to recognize people that have either certification in what they're doing, and it saves the school a lot of money, because if you have to contract out for a welder, it costs a fortune for anything they do.
Yep.
I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That supports that discussion. All right, thank you, Mario. Item 2C, discussion action on approval of salary increase for all DUSD employees for school year 2020, 2021. Ms. Samaniego, I'm going to just turn it over to you because the charge you were given from the last meeting is to see, based on the information that we didn't have, to see if there was any information that would be in the offing that would support. We knew that we probably could do 6 and 3, but the board was adamant about 7 and 4. And you were going to go back, and we gave you a week and discuss with whoever you needed to and get all the information. And the question would be now, can you do the 7 and 4 for the staff? And I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Samaniego.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so over the week that we had, we met extensively with the three of us, including the two ladies that run our grants, as the grants was the issue that came about at our last meeting where we had to table this item. So after meeting with Mrs. Walker, who oversees ESS and the IDEA grant. If you recall, she had information that she didn't have the full amount yet. And she, being that she's a first-year director and not, really having experience or the knowledge of how this works, she did contact the state and did get information, and they did confirm that her full amount would be given after July 1. And so we don't have any concern on that aspect because we have the number of ESS kids, and we know we have them. And so the amount that Mrs. Walker was seeing in the IDEA grant was either, they said 70 to 90% of the budget, but the full amount will be given after the July 1st date. Then in really focusing on the SEI grant, which was the grant that was really worrying us because 12 positions are paid out of that grant. And if that money we had no information on. Mrs. Cox didn't have, the slightest clue as to 100,000, 200,000 or any of that. And as of today, she still doesn't. However, she is very confident that after July 1, because she's got more experience with the grants and knows that on July 1 there is a rollover and then the full amounts of the grants are awarded. So what we did there, we met extensively and came with a solution that Mrs. Cox and Mr. Soto will work together, and if there is a need to change people around in how they are funded with, pertaining to their salaries, to relieve some of those positions that were under the SEI grant, that it wouldn't necessarily affect the M&O budget, they're going to do that. So, for example, if I'm paid out of the SEI grant, Mrs. Cox and Mr. Soto are going to review the grants and the funding source and then possibly move me into a Title I funding source, and that position will be covered by Title I. So my position you wouldn't have to worry about it with the SEI grant, and neither would Mr. Soto with M&O monies. So after doing extensive numbers and work and collaboration between the three of us and the two ladies, we determined that we could do the 7 and the 4. And so that is what we're recommending. The whole moving of staff around, it has to be done very carefully because there's some guidelines that we have to go by. But that won't be done until that information comes to us for the SEI grant. But we asked Mr. Soto, both Mr. Nunez and I, asked Mr. Soto and Mrs. Cox and Mrs. Walker if after knowing that information we felt confident that we could still move forward with the 7 and the 4, because that is our intention as well. And Mr. Soto agreed that we could. And I know that the big question from the board was, will we be able to sustain it the year after? And I want to make sure that our staff understands that we don't have that answer. And as you and the board said last meeting, is our intention is to sustain it. But we will get to that when we get to that for next year's, for 21-22 school year, because we don't have that answer right now. But right now, we feel confident that our 7% increase will go to teachers, TOSAs, the counselors, those that are certified. And then administrators that are certified by Department of Ed. These are administrators, our principals, our assistant principals, our directors, our classified directors, and they will be getting the 4%. And then the classified salary schedule, again, there is a variation in the amount of raise that they're going to get depending on the category that they are in. But everybody will get, something. We don't have the money right now to say classified, everybody's going to get $1.50, for example. And hopefully next year, we would able to do, something standard for the classified staff, and hopefully, fix some of these positions that we still want to be able to move in category. Mr. Soto, do you?
Well,
do you have any questions for me?
that is very good news, and I want you to corroborate that because you're the guy that looks at those numbers every day. But
Yeah.
that is very good news, and I think that for the last couple of years that Mr. Ramos, Dr. Gomez, Mr. Sabal, Mr. Lind, and myself have been strongly supporting and wanting this to happen, because and the reason I'm going to say this because I want you to comment on this too. If you recall last meeting, I read a correspondence from JLBC, and there's been another one that recently came out. And JLBC is the Joint Legislative Budget Committee board members. They're the ones that advise the legislature on how much money to spend and anything to do with fiscal responsibility. But the point being that the news for next year is not good at all. And the sustainability is going to be what I think we're going to strive for. We certainly will look at anything we can do, as always, as an increase. But the main thing for us next year is, with the funding from the state, is to be able to sustain this. Because if we can't, and then we have to go back, that immediately translates into no new monies, and it means not being able to sustain that. So our goal is going to, and that's why I'm telling you, Mr. Soto, our goal is next year is certainly to give an increase if possible, but the main goal is to sustain, okay? So why don't you tell us about, just give us a brief analysis of what your budget looks like when you consider your projects pending, liabilities as far as expenditures and those things. So I'll just turn it over to you now.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Like Mr. Samaniego said, I mean, we're pretty confident that we can do what we're proposing at this point. Also, with what you said, the following year is going to be very, very challenging in terms of funding. But again, our best asset is our employees, and we want to do what we can as best as we can. And if we have the monies now, let's go ahead and do it. Again, we'll just adjust, or we're gonna manage what we are thrown at by the state next year. But we're gonna have to be very, very conservative in our expenses this coming year. But I couldn't give you an answer of what the state is gonna do. But we've kind of like knowing what's gonna happen. They're already saying that they're going to reduce the 301 monies and stuff like that. But it will be a constant monitoring of the monies that we're spending to make sure that we're going to continue being fiscally responsible. They're going to be in good financial health throughout the year. Again, that's the recommendation that we're proposing to you guys. Like Mr. Samaniego said, we cannot guarantee you 100% that we're going to sustain it. But again, many years we've been able to manage it and keep it going. So I really don't see a big problem or a big issue for next year.
Never at the expense of supplies, anything that deals directly
Correct.
with students. But those items and those expenditures that are made, that are generally considered perfunctory during the year, that, we're going to spend, every school's got $1,200, you've got $500, those things should be monitored very carefully,
Correct.
keeping in mind the sustainability.
Correct.
And also if there's a possibility to give an increase. So knowing that, when you start next fiscal year, I'm just suggesting that you monitor that budget very, very carefully, and that those frivolous expenditures and spending that they, and travel is another one, that they should be looked at very carefully, because those expenses are going to affect the sustainability and also the ability for the administration to recommend to the board again that there be because there's got to be absolute responsibility of monitoring that budget, okay?
Correct.
And that's why I feel comfortable today doing this, and thank the administration for working as hard as you did and supporting it. You're the ones that live with the finances and the expenditures every day, and you've got the checkbook. So you know what you can do and what you can't do, and you're wholeheartedly supporting it is very encouraging. All right?
And I do want to add that there were two things that we really wanted to do in these increases, or not even in the increase, but in just putting forth on our salary placement schedules. And one, I think it was brought up when we had, I'm not sure if it was a work study session or when we spoke about ELD teachers and the amount of work that they do, and the responsibility, and us being able to compensate our ELD teachers via stipend, like we do our math and our science and our
special
SPED teachers who are appropriately certified. And so because of this situation and how close in budget we're going to be and monitoring it at this time, we weren't able to do that stipend for it to include ELD teachers. And that was one thing that, that I really wanted to do, and I think Mr. Nunez did too, and the principals did too. So that is still something that we need to strive for so that we can offer, because you all know that our district is, Title I district, and many of our, some schools have more ELL kids than others, and so the responsibilities of that ELD teacher, not that they're more or less than any other regular teacher, but it's more of a challenge as we are being, classified with the letter grade, a lot of it based on to how much growth we have in ELD. So that was one thing we were not able to do at this point. And then another thing is that if you notice on our salary schedules, in order to get any kind of recognition for your loyalty and dedication to this district, you've got to stay with the district till you're 21 years. And so at that point, you get a little bump in pay. Other districts that Mr. Nunez looked at, had something from, what was it?
500.
Yeah, 500 at, the 5th year, at the 10th year. And so trying to give a little bit of an incentive, as you progress in the number of years you stay. And not everybody ends up staying 21 years. So we wanted to do that, and DEA, that was one of the conversations we had with DEA. But in running those numbers and being able to do that at this point would really cost the M&O budget right now, because if we were to make it effective for July 1, then Mr. Soto would have to adjust everybody that's, at that 5-year or 10-year mark or whatever. And so I just want to say that we will attempt to hopefully next year be able to do that, or maybe even in the year, if we are able to, because I think that is important. Somebody has to wait 21 years to be able to get some kind of a little reward recognition for the loyalty to this district.
No, and I agree. You've got so many things going right now, especially we were going to have that conversation regarding the ELD teachers that you mentioned. But we'll bring that back. Yes, Dr. Ed.
Yeah, I just have a question. When you talk about sustainability, I might have one idea and then you guys have another idea. So let's say, to me, sustainability is if we give this 7%, sustainability to me would mean that next year they would have the same salary, not another 7% increase. To me, sustainability is this increase in pay. Can we afford to do it in
22.
22 or yeah? In other words, if you increase a teacher's salary, let's say in the 7% by 500, would you be able to pay them the same amount the next year? Sustainability does not mean to me that next year we're going to give them another 7%.
No.
Since you don't know what the state funding is going to be. So that's my idea of sustainability.
No, you got it. You got it right. You got it right. And let me take it just a little bit further. Translated, it means that if we had the money to do it this year, would we have the same amount of money forthcoming for next year, which doesn't look very good at all? That's the reason we keep using that word. And that's why I said earlier, we at least want to sustain what we did, and hopefully with the amount of money we get next year that we can do it. And then if it's possible to give it a little bit more, but that's kind of pie in the sky, knowing what we know. So you're exactly right, and that's what it means, Dr. Ed.
Okay.
Mr. President, may I share something? Just
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sure, absolutely.
there's a saying, I like a lot of quotes, and there's one that says something like, knowledge speaks and wisdom listens. And just for the record, I've worked with many administrations, and as the direction of the board was to seek out the highest to be able to support the teachers, I want to commend my colleagues, Mr. Soto and Mrs. Samaniego, because one of the things that really took place this year is, yes, I pull up a lot of different districts' wages and so forth, including some Phoenix area districts. In our conversations this year, we have like regular check-ins with DEA, the Education Association here, meet with different stakeholders and so forth. And The increase in the district right now for a starting teacher is above many of those even in the Phoenix area. Primarily for the reason that we provide the 301 full amount to teachers, which is really unheard of in many districts. And so that puts us up for a starting teacher at or above $40,000. And so, again, I want to commend the team because while, I'm sure Superintendent Samaniego and Mr. Soto have had some sleepless nights based on the fact of how can we actually do this, that every different issue does come to mind and that it is taken to heart, like Mrs. Samaniego just mentioned, the ELD stipends and how we can maybe do this longevity increase. And so oftentimes it gets brushed out in many places, but here a lot of the listening took place. And so I just want to, for the record, share that because oftentimes as teachers, we don't know what's going on in this level. And so I think that a lot of it is taken to heart here and that most of it, that is still held at the heart of it. So teachers' increases can be put into place. So I just wanted to share that for the record.
No, appreciate that. You deal with that on a daily basis. And of course, in your recruiting and the things that you do regarding personnel that is correlated to salary. So I think we're ready for a motion, and before we do that, Ms. Samaniego, I want either you or Mr. Soto to make the statement, and then we'll make the motion because you specifically know who's going to get the 7% and who's going to get the 4%. So if you will, as you did earlier, you said teachers, counselors, TOSAs, but there's going to be a separation. So you identify, and we'll make the motion as presented by you.
Okay. So for what we're recommending is a 7% increase to those on the certified salary placement schedule to include teachers, counselors, behavior specialists, TOSAs, and school improvement specialists that are on the certified salary schedule. That's the 7% increase. The administrators on the administrator salary schedule would be a 4% salary increase. And again, these are our directors, our principals, assistant principals, as certified and school psychologist by the Board of Education, okay? That's our 4%. And then
The State Board
the
of
State Board of Education, yes. And then the classified salary schedule increases, again, would be there's not a set amount, but it is based on the numbers that Mr. Soto already came up with pertaining to that salary schedule and anybody on that classified salary schedule. And we have nurses and our supervisors are also, considered our classified staff, and they will be getting the nurses and supervisors a 3%.
I think it's important, you need to say something about the number, because if you don't give a specific number on the classified, then it's up in the air, and we don't know what it is, and it's got to be for the record. So could you say again what that classified
A range, maybe
meant?
from 25 cents to...
Right. Again, there's no specific amount, but depending on what category they're placed, and remember what I fix is just the increase on those categories. So, for instance, some employees, like on the minimum wage, they wouldn't get any raise because they're still at the $12, but those people are going to get at least 25 cents. The first two categories are going to get 25 cents each. The other ones, it depends. It varies. Some of them get 33 cents. Some of them get 49 cents. Some of them get $1.50. It depends. The further you go on the categories, it's higher. Correct.
So the motion could say as determined
by the stuff.
as determined by the business office. Okay. In other words, as you determine when you, I want to make sure we do it right. As determined according to the different categories
On the new
On
salary
the
schedule.
classified
on
salary
the
schedule.
classified schedule. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Mr.
I'll
Nunez,
entertain
did
a
I
motion,
forget
Mr.
anything?
Mr. Lindeman, to approve that recommendation.
I move to approve the recommendation by administration for the salary increases.
Is there a second, Mr. Ramos or Dr. Ed?
Yes, second.
Mr. Ramos.
Mr. Ramos, all right. Any further discussion? Administration, anything else?
No.
Roll call.
Mr. Ramos?
Yes,
Mr. Lindemann?
Yes.
Dr. Gomez?
Yes.
Mr. Bahrain?
Yes. Again, I want to take this opportunity to quickly thank Mr. Ramos, Dr. Ed, Mr. Linneman, Mr. Sabal for their support in doing this, and the administration for doing all the work you did in getting us here, okay? Item 2D, discussion action on the approval of fiscal year 2020-21 employment contracts for directors, principals, and assistant principals. Ms. Samaniego.
As presented, so now that we have a salary increase approval and a salaries placement schedule, we are bringing to you the following administrators for an approval of contract for next year. So we have Mrs. Katie Walker, Director of ESS, Mr. Pineda, Director of Food Service, Karina Moen, Principal at Clausen, Fernando Morales, Principal at Ferris, Claudia Leon, Principal at Joe Carlson, Rodna La Madrid, Principal at Stevenson, Deborah Herrera, Principal Pearl Huber Middle School, Melissa Rodriguez, Principal RBMS, Mr. Walker, Principal DHS, and this will be his last year. Henry Jones, Assistant Principal, Paul Huber Middle School. Dr. Rodney Egan, Assistant Principal, Ray Berrien Middle School. Geraldina Trevino, Assistant Principal, Douglas High School. And Angel Ortega, Athletic Director, Assistant Principal at DHS.
Pineda, what school?
Mr. Pineda is the Food Service Director,
How does he fit in there? He's not certified as
but he's a director. He's one of the directors, and so
We've talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the directors, Mr. Durazo included,
Mm-hmm.
and Mr. Pineda. There's another one. Who's the other one?
it's just Mr. Durazo and Mr. Pineda.
Why, well, then let me just ask the question, being the devil's advocate. Why isn't Mr. Durazo mentioned there?
He's separate on the next item because of the with the other two directors.
But Pineda is
Mm-hmm.
not certified by the State Board of Education to be included with those people as a certified state recognized food director.
But what we're approving is we're asking to approve is his employment contract.
But yes, but why isn't he included with Marco?
Because Marco is with the other two that deal with the whole benefits issue, and that's why Mr. Durazo is with the other two.
Well, then we should do him. I just want to make sure that we're always clear
Yes,
on that.
Mr. Pineda is not a certified
Right.
administrator
Right.
by State Board of Education, but he is one of our directors, and he's the only one there, along with Mrs. Walker, that's in the director level, that we're asking to get approved a contract. But if we need
I know,
to
but
put them separately,
and I really don't want to be that technical, but Mr. Pineda, in the true sense of the word, is not a director like Mrs. Walker, Mr. Young, or Mr. Young's, Mrs. Cox. He's, in the true sense of the word, he's not a
Separate,
director in that same category. So he should be considered differently.
Okay.
Because what happens when you come up with, well, you can smirk over there, but the truth of the matter is that he is not a certified director. Because he's not going to get the benefits, that doesn't negate the fact that he's not certified by the State Board of Education. Why not put, if you've got Tony Peralta up there that's a certified mechanic, why not put him in there? Okay, you call him Director of Transportation, or Robert, Director of Transportation. I just want to make sure that down the road that they don't come back and say, well, you included him as a director with those people. Why isn't he getting those other benefits? And that was my next question. Have we already?
no, that's the next
Have
item.
we already approved the benefits for the directors?
No, that's the next item.
Okay, where is Mr. Pineda going to be on that one?
He doesn't get them, because remember, Mrs.
Right,
Mrs.
exactly,
Yeah, so
because
that's
by
why he's.
attrition, we worked him out.
Yes.
All right. I want to hear from Mr. Soto, because that to me is an issue. Why, because I know you're the one that puts him there. Why?
I don't. I don't put them there, but I really don't see the difference. A director is a director. I get it that they're not school board certified, but it's part of leadership.
But
It's
you've
a
got
director.
a director as listed in the State Board rules and regulations, that to be a director by the State Board of Education, you have to have accomplished and met all of these requirements. That's a director. A director in classified doesn't have to meet all those requirements. So why would you consider them with those people in one category or one question, and then in another one remove them? That's my point. You people live with it. If you don't have a problem with it, then so be it. But Director of Nursing is another one. The Director of Nursing doesn't fit anywhere in the State Board of Education rules and regulations. They're certified by their association, all right? But in the State Board rules, you do have the special ed director. What does it take? It takes all these hours, this background, this practicum, and all these things. The Director of Curriculum Director, that's part of the State Board of Education. Nowhere in the State Board rules and regulations does it show Food Director. Okay, I just want to be precise. That's the point.
And if I may add, there is a distinction. We have on our salary schedules, there is a certified, director, which by Arizona State Board of Education, and all the things that Mr. Burain said. And then we have a classified director. So if by saying maybe classified director or just adding him to this list of people, maybe what we should have done is put him separately and just as the
Yes.
approval of a classified director
Yes.
contract, because that's what it is. We're approving his classified director contract, which there is a distinction between a certified and a classified director.
Yeah, I just think, the State Board has rules and regulations, and if they ever find you out of compliance, because, I've raised the issue of the department heads at the high school. They're called, what do they call, Randy?
Department chairs.
But all through their job description, it says supervise, evaluate, supervise. That requires State Board certification.
Yes.
And the job description is what determines what the title's going to be. And the title determines what the certification's going to be.
And
So-
if I may add, their contract, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Nunez, their contract is different than the certified director's contract because of that language of Arizona State Board certification guidelines. So a director's contract is very similar to the principal contract because we have to have that certification in there. The classified director contract is different, and Candy provides that. That is a distinction. That is
Okay.
very different.
All right, so anyway, where are we?
Motion.
But I
No,
think
no,
under
I'm just-
a
I'm just-
school
I'm just
district,
kidding.
but still, the director is under the purview of the school district. So that's why in many districts it's not even isolated as certified or classified. It's listed solely as director. But I see the certifications that you're mentioning would be like almost like a qualified evaluator and so forth. I think the only thing that's different is it's almost like when we start looking at other things, like it varies because oftentimes names get misconstrued. It's not the same as a band director unless it's something as a district level band director. So I think it's all about the verbiage and sometimes like just the understanding. But I think at the district level, the director is still at the director level.
No,
Does that
for all
make sense?
intents and purposes, other than that you don't put them in with the classified, with the certified. That's fine. I'll
Make a note, and for
I'll
future.
relinquish,
Okay.
and I'll let you do whatever you want to do. If it's just a matter of semantics, and that's
Yes.
to me, it's not. It's a matter of certification. And I'm sorry, but, I've lived with that kind of stuff, and it just jumped out at me when I saw it there. All right, we wasted a lot of time on that, and we're going to apologize, but we need a motion, correct? All right, Mr. Lindeman.
I move to approve the fiscal year 2020-2021 employment contracts for directors, principals, and assistant principals as presented.
Do we have a second, Dr. Ed or Mr. Ramos?
Dr. Ed, yes.
Okay,
I
second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Ramos?
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman?
Yes.
Dr. Gomez?
Yes.
Mr. Burain?
Yes. Item E, discussion action on the approval of fiscal year 2020-21 employment contracts for certified and classified administrative staff. Ms. Samaniego.
Okay, so here you have Mrs. Cox, Director of State and Federal Programs, Mr. Durazo, Classified Director, who's in charge of Information Technology, and Mr. Young, CT Director and Douglas High School Assistant Principal. And the reason that they are separate is due to the fact that, over the last years since they've been in those positions, there is that added benefit to their health benefit. And we are supposed to bring it to you every year so that you can make the decision to continue that. And we have been grandfathering as directed by the board. If these individuals would leave their position and we would hire anybody else new, then that benefit goes away. So that's why they're separate.
You ready? Any discussion, members of the board?
No.
Okay, let's get a
No.
motion on the floor. Mr. Lynn?
I move to approve the fiscal year 2020, 2021 employment contracts for certified and classified administrative staff.
Is there a second?
Ramos.
Second.
Yes. Second.
Okay.
Mr. Ramos.
We have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Ramos?
Yes.
Mr. Lindemann?
Yes.
Dr. Gomez?
Yes.
Mr. Brain?
Yes. Item 3. Anything else?
Mr. Bahrain?
Yes.
Dr. Ed wanted to make a comment on something, on the state of
Oh,
the
yeah,
district.
go ahead, Doctor.
Yes, and this concerned, because I saw that the state of the district address had been canceled.
Mm-hmm.
But with the changes that are going on, I still think that we should find for the superintendent to do either a online thing, yeah, a virtual, yes, okay, a virtual State of the Union, because there's so much that needs to be put out to the public with the graduation, with the salaries, with the, just a lot of stuff that needs to be said. So I really would like you to consider to keep it and just do it a virtual.
Okay, I can certainly look at that. I hadn't even thought of that option, just because we like to get the kids involved and, of course, all that. But with that not being possible, I can definitely address and provide a state of the district, and Marco can record me. And that will be
Yes.
fine, and then we can share it out.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that idea.
Okay, and you're going to get especially the graduation issue out on
Yes.
online and
Yes, I'll work with Mr. Walker. He'll communicate via the high school because they have a direct, their senior link and all that information, and then we'll do something at the district level.
What about the contracts and all those things now? What are the
Mr.
timelines? Are
Nunez?
you guys good on all that, Mr. Soto?
Yeah, we should be able to have the spreadsheets ready, so the HR ladies can start working on them.
Yeah, they're ready to go.
I think what they said is they're going to work on the certified first, all the
Certified
teachers,
first, and
TOSAs,
then-
and behavior specialists.
And wage notices. Well, they're working on them simultaneously, but I think the priority is to get those teacher
Do you think there's
contracts
going to be any problem with getting those contracts out and you not having kind of a good handle on who's going to come back or not come back?
No, we have a
We
handle.
know,
No,
we know
uh-huh.
who's coming back.
Pretty good. Okay.
We're good.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for being here this morning. Thank you, Ms. Samaniego, for all the time you spent
Okay.
on that, especially you, Mr. Soto, and all of your expertise with those numbers and allowing this to happen. So we'll entertain a motion to adjourn
I move to adjourn.
by Mr. Lindeman,
Ramos.
second by Mr. Ramos. All those in favor signify